Recently, Frostykin reached out to me with the file for their upcoming mod, Elfilin. You'll have most likely seen them announced at the most recent SRB2 Direct, but for anyone else, they are the little blue squirrel thing that follows Kirby around in Kirby and the Forgotten Land. From what I've heard, the writers for that game made the incredibly brave decision not to make him some sort of demonic god entity, a true first for the Kirby franchise. As this is therefore a preview of a character that is not yet completed and available to the public, I will not be reviewing things such as sprites and movesets with a truly quantifiable score like usual, but rather just lay out what the character is like so that expectations can be fairly set for when he is released. But without further ado, let's dive in. Having seen Elfilin's trailer during the SRB2 Direct, I assumed that, based off their floatiness, constant hovering and general appearance as some sort of flying squirrel, they would be a character built to reach incredibly high areas that others could simply never travel high enough to get to. Think characters like Tails or Egg Robo, someone with some sort of flight ability that means they sacrifice speed for versatility. But this simply isn't the case. Elfilin can certainly reach high places using his abilities, but it isn't the crux and focus of his game plan. Instead, I invite you to cast your mind back to when I covered Pierre the Peacock several months back, and how his abilities didn't get him particularly high, but allowed him to sustain what height he naturally gains through the usage of environmental landscaping and gimmicks for far longer than normal. Elfilin? He is Pierre on steroids. But before anything can be said about his moveset proper, we must first look at how he controls differently than the rest of the SRB2 cast. Whilst vanilla characters do have slightly modified stats in some places, such as jump height, acceleration or top speed, they all have more or less the same level of friction, gravity, etc., which means they all feel like they are about the same weight and size. Elfilin, befitting his much smaller stature and floating nature, plays significantly looser than any vanilla character, taking much longer to stop after letting go of the movement commands and constantly bouncing up and down near the floor. Think of Egg Robo as the closest reference. His air control is also quite different. He seems to fall significantly slower than the base roster, practically gliding if you choose to keep holding forward, and his low height means that environmental gimmicks like springs will launch them far higher and further than they normally would. Despite his appearance as an aerial master though, Elfilin isn't naturally that great in increasing his height over where he begins. Although he does hover, he cannot fly like Tails, and his jump is quite pathetic. I don't have exact data, but it feels like playing Knuckles and being unable to make the simple rises in terrain the rest of the cast can simply jump over. This means that you do have to be fairly confident you're at least slightly above wherever you're trying to go. He is permanently in a jumpable state, even when thrown into the air by a gimmick or after using an ability, but it still only goes as high as it does on the ground, and therefore is still best used to increase the horizontal distance travelled. One of his abilities does allow him to launch back up to where he dropped down from, but only when he has ground underneath him, and another can be held to further increase your horizontal distance, but it locks you on your current axis and commits you to dropping very quickly if held too long. Moving on to abilities, this is where Elfilin gains a lot of his movement options that can really launch him very far, but I'd say that he is also a character that has a higher than average skill floor to be played. His abilities are very powerful, to be sure, but they can be quite finicky and are currently very committal. Once you use them, you can't back out or cancel them for a very long time. First is the rebound, which is the singular ability which can get you some serious height. Dropping down onto the ground above a certain speed will cause you to bounce back up with some of it, which can quickly reach very high places if you find yourself in a large enough area to chain together consecutive bounces without slowing down. The rebound can be effectively cancelled by jumping right before or after hitting the ground to cut your speed, but if your timing is off, it certainly helps to further amplify the general lack of control Elfilin will have. Next up is the first active ability, mapped to your double jump. It is the Spear Crass, which upon use poses out a large spear aimed at the ground. It can be held for a while, during which you cannot lose or gain height, which is primarily for making sure you have lined up with your enemy, but can also be exploited towards the end of a jump or aerial launch to cover the small distance you might not otherwise make. After this invisible timer expires, or upon simply letting go of jump, you are launched straight down towards the ground, which destroys any enemies you contact, as well as breakable objects like walls, floors and monitors. It can also lead to embarrassing deaths if you've miscalculated how far you have left to reach the next platform over a bottomless pit, because you remain committed to this attack for an extremely long time before it can be cancelled, meaning that even if you can jump out of the attack, you're still likely too low to reach a platform to safety. It also lodges itself in the ground, which can allow it to be used as a trap, although the situations where this will be particularly useful are limited to a few boss battles and the chaos of multiplayer. Finally, we have Elfilin's signature ability, the one the rest of the moveset is built around the smart usage of, the portal toss/teleport. Pressing spin at any point will launch out a small energy ball, which, after a few seconds, ruptures into a star-shaped portal. At this point, pressing spin again will teleport you to this portal, maintaining your current speed and trajectory, but resetting your jump counter. This ability, when used effectively, is extremely powerful, being the single biggest asset Elfilin has that massively increases its versatility, but panic spamming of the portal toss oftentimes lead to death or complete ruination of the flow state. Once the portal has been released, it cannot be moved or manually detonated, and it only naturally degrades after a fair while, so hurriedly launching it while turning a corner, only to miss the platform or angle you're aiming for, means that you either have to commit to the jump and try and finesse towards where you're looking, or either wait around and try again, or find a different path. It can be used as a safety net before making a risky jump, allowing you to teleport back to a safe location, but messily using it after bungling a jump is unlikely to save you, and instead likely only delays the inevitable. Using it effectively though, revolutionises how you play Elfilin, or at least it feels like it will, because I've never really got the hang of it. Combining it with the rebound is the bread and butter of Elfilin's moveset, and a tool I can imagine will be the crux of speedruns, as good timing can launch you incredibly far and high very quickly from an already raised position. Even less sophisticated usage of the ability, simply launching it from a standstill, can help with skipping parts of the level, as it does still allow you to gain some height. It can also help with beginning a rebound string, allowing you to reach the initial height needed to reach the minimum landing speed required. With the abilities listed, you might somewhat argue with my initial assessment of Elfilin as primarily a character that maintains its height for much longer than usual, instead of actively increasing it. Smart usage of the rebound and portal toss can reach heights comparable to almost any other aerial pro, given the time and space to reach that point, and it could certainly be just that I'm not very good at playing them. Scrap that, my decision is absolutely based off how I'm nowhere near reaching the full potential of the character, but I'd say that the main combo and ability Elfilin has is still somewhat situational, relying on you having the space, angle, height and simple presence of mind to accurately launch the portal toss in the right direction at the right time, at the right point of your jump arc, before reaching the portal at the right time so you don't crash into a bottomless pit in a slightly different spot than before, all likely taking place in a split second. This is why I believe Elfilin is a character with a high skill floor and a monumentally high skill ceiling. You cannot get away with simple ability spamming, and their abilities are all highly committal, all on top of a character who is very floaty and lacks control. I can imagine many people are going to have a lot of fun with him when the time comes for release, especially for those who are, actually good at SRB 2. With that being said, I hope this preview was useful for you to set your expectations of Elfilin correctly, and begin strategizing how their abilities can be best used and exploited. I'd like to thank Frostykin for trusting me with providing a fair overview of the character. I hope you enjoyed the video, and ciao.